Even though we're really getting down to crunch time here before MLB 21 comes out, and especially now that we made the playoffs, who knows how many more episodes of this need to come out within the next 5 days? But I still have to allow myself to indulge because I love stats. I love looking through stats at the end of a season like this. And a lot of times I get carried away. So, word of warning, I mean, I guess you already know what the runtime of this episode is. But back in the White Sox March to October, when I did the regular season stat recap, that was like a 50-minute long video. So I'll try to contain myself a bit. I'll try not to let it get to that point, but I'm not going to make any promises. So first off, obviously we made the playoffs in the last episode. We couldn't get past the Astros though to take the division, but we still did make the wild card, the second wild card spot. So let's start the recap here by looking through the records here. So the Astros, they finished 98-64. We did come pretty close to catching up to them. If we would have started this last push a little sooner, who knows? We might have been able to do it. And as a whole, this division was a lot stronger than I think I would have guessed. 4 teams over 500 and 12 games over 500, the Angels. So it was a pretty tough division all throughout the year, especially using a team like the Rangers, who obviously we turned them into a little bit better of a team, but it's not like we got a dominant roster. But look at that record within the division. 50-26 when playing somebody from the division. That's the best divisional record among the teams in the division. But we also had the exact same record playing at home or on the road. So did the A's too. But I think of that as a good thing, because then being on the road, which we will be for the wild card game, it's not going to put us at a disadvantage. Alright, so let's look through the rest here. Let's do American League first. So the Twins won the Central. They beat the Sox by 1 game. And actually, they had to do a game 163 here. So that's fun. And the Twins won that one. So that's what, reversing what happened all the way back in 2008, was it? And then in the East, the Rays also... Well, what happened here? Did they also have a game 163? I think they did, because yeah, the Astros, their record is 98-64, but the Rays have 1 extra loss. So both the other AL divisions had to do a game 163. So actually that puts us in a little bit better of a spot against the Yankees, because you would think that maybe they don't have Garrett Cole available then. So then over to the National League. What do we got on the other side? The Dodgers winning 100 games and the Padres winning 99. That one did not end in a 1-game playoff, even though it almost did. And then in the Central, the Cubs took that. Brewers finish at a 500 record. That's a pretty solid division up and down, except for the Pirates. And then in the East, we had the Braves taking that division by 1 game. And then the Phillies also making the wild card spot. So all these divisions, except for the NL Central, if I remember right, every division except the NL Central and our division was decided by 1 game. Yeah, I can already tell I'm not going to be able to hold myself back from going too long in this one. But unfortunately, I hope they change this for next year's March to October. But once you get to the point of being in the playoffs, you can't go back and look at your stats just on this screen. It just automatically converts over to playoff stats, and even if you hit toggle stat type, it just goes to career stats. And then also you don't get to see the league leaders. So what I normally do in March to October is after the whole thing is over, I do a little bonus recap at the end, because then if I turn it into a franchise mode, which I'm not going to do for a series, but if you convert it to a franchise mode, you can go back and see things like league leaders and awards and stuff like that. Alright, so let's get into these stats. So I'm just gonna go to this screen, hit triangle on everybody, and look through them all individually. So let's start with the pitching. And at least we know now for sure, actually I'm going to go through everybody first here, but we know now for sure that both Lynn and Kluber were all-stars. And let's see if we got any more. I do know that Perez was one. I know we had one more, but I don't remember. Maybe he was the only one. None of our relievers, not even Hader. I mean, he wasn't good until we got him, really. Perez was an all-star. And anybody else? Manuel Margot. Alright, let's start these stats here. Let's start with Lance Lynn. So he finished the season at an 89 overall, but he's got good morale. Obviously, even though he's an A potential, being 32 years old, he's really not going to get a ton better. So he went 16-10, and then obviously with no injuries in March to October, he pitched an insane amount. 234 innings pitched, gave up 29 home runs, struck out 247, ended with a 3.50 ERA, 1.12 WHIP. So it definitely was one of his better seasons he's had, at least in the recent couple years here. But it could have been on track to be better. I said this in one episode, but like the first 2/3 of the season, him and Kluber were like almost neck and neck in terms of their stats. And you'll see what Kluber's were, assuming they didn't fall off at the end. I guess I didn't check that. But Lance Lynn definitely had an ERA under 3 for like 2/3 of the year. And then he kind of hit a rough patch. I think it went all the way up to like 390 something. So he got it a little bit back down towards the end. Obviously still a good season, 5.1 wins above replacement. So he was definitely a good pitcher for us. And then, you know, him and Kluber as the 1-2 punch here. So Kluber 17-10, 242 innings pitched. He definitely looked like the Kluber of old. He had a 2.9 ERA, which I think even that went up. I think for most of the year he was hovering around 2.5. So he must have hit a little bit of a rough patch. Obviously nothing too crazy because it still stayed under 3. But he got back up to 251 strikeouts, a whip of 1.04. I mean, this is a season you can almost compare to some of his better seasons in Cleveland. Maybe not his 2 crazy good seasons in Cleveland, 2013 and 2017. But other than those 2 years, he's definitely comparable to the rest of his career. Finished with a 6.1 wins above replacement. But yeah, then after those 2 guys, it kind of dropped off a bit. We had Kyle Gibson. The whole year, his morale was like crazy high, so it made him like 4 or 5 overall higher than he actually was. But he was not as good as you'd probably think he'd be based on his overall. 9-10 record, didn't quite make it to 200 innings. He had a 5.25 ERA with 187 strikeouts. 15 quality starts though, 1.3 WAR. So I don't know. I mean, if he probably could have given up a little less runs, he would have been a lot better on paper. But I don't even remember getting a chance to pitch with him myself. Like I can't remember if there was a time where we loaded into a game and he was still pitching. There might have been once or twice where like he was technically still pitching, but his energy was so low that I just didn't use him. So yeah, he was a bit of a letdown. Colby Allard up next. He definitely had a roller coaster of a season. Like I remember when he started off, we went over it. He gave up 32 runs in like his first 16 innings. So his ERA was way up there. Then it came down, then it kind of went back up, and now it's settled at 557. So, I mean, it could have ended up a lot worse. It's not like it ended up in a good spot by any means, but I don't know. He was solid enough. And him being a younger pitcher, only 21 years old, B potential, he definitely went up a bit throughout the year, finishing at a 70 overall. I don't remember what he started at, maybe a 67 or 68. But I remember, you know, the frustrations early on when we couldn't call anybody up. But we could have had Jared Eichhoff, who was like a 78 overall. We could have had, I think it was Edison Volquez, who was like a 73. So we could have had a couple better options than Allard. And definitely a better option than the next guy in terms of overall. But Joe Palumbo actually put together a pretty solid season. He finished at a 67 overall with 71 morale, but that's up a lot. He started at the year, I want to say it was a 62 overall. It might have been 61, but either way, he went up a bunch. And yeah, his stats really solid. He went over 200 innings, 15-9 record, and for an overall in the 60s to finish with an ERA of 4.22, that's huge. Especially when how I was saying with Allard, we could have had other guys if the game let us call them up that would have been a much higher overall. It was really nice to have Palumbo not struggle really at all throughout the season. And he's really the only guy, and there could be a pretty solid chance of it too, but he's really the only guy I think that could be in line for some type of major award. I actually wouldn't be surprised if he ends up with the Rookie of the Year. With 200 innings pitched as a rookie, that could do it. All right, on to relievers. Let's just start from the top. Leclerc, he was our closer to start. He's still kind of young, so he went up a little bit on the season. I don't know what he started at. With those upgrades, he had to have gone up at least one. And he was okay. I mean, he definitely wasn't a bad closer, but whenever I used him, I had some trouble locating, and then obviously near the end of the year, he gave up a game or two, but he still finished with 28 saves and 32 innings pitched, a lot of strikeouts, ERA right around 3.7 WAR. Actually, that reminds me, I didn't look at the WAR for, I might have looked at it for Gibson, but just in case you guys are curious, 1.3 for Gibson, 1.1 for Allard, and 3 for Palumbo. On to David Phelps now. We didn't have him for too long. He was our last trade before the deadline. I only pitched with him a couple times. He wasn't that great when I used him, but he finished with 51 innings, 5.57 ERA, 65 strikeouts. I don't know. He's not somebody who excites me too much just because of me not doing that great with him. Even 0 on the WAR, so he's just a replacement level pitcher then. Moving on, we got Nicasio. He was really good. I liked pitching with him. He always seemed to be the guy to just keep things in control. So he pitched in 32 games. So that's actually the least amount of games he's pitched since 2013. 40 innings, gave up 16 runs for a 3.54 ERA, 40 strikeouts. Like I said, he was just kind of the guy who kept things in control, only a .3 WAR. He wasn't dominant or anything, but seemed pretty dependable. Then we move on to Brett Martin. Until we got Hader, he was the only lefty option we had in the bullpen. And I liked pitching with him. I actually thought he had some good stuff. He wasn't that great when the game simulated with him, though. He had an ERA over 5. But I feel like he was better than that. I wouldn't hesitate to bring him into the game if we need to in the playoffs. So he finishes, with 31 strikeouts, a WAR of .5, so higher than Nicasio. I don't know what goes into pitcher WAR. You'd think, looking at just these stats, that Nicasio had a better season, but apparently, according to wins above replacement, Brett Martin was better. And we got Jonathan Hernandez next. He was one of my favorite guys to use. I didn't use him as much as our bullpen improved from trades, but I really liked using him early on. 5 pitches is always nice. He threw a lot. He got a lot of work. 82 innings, struck out 84 batters, kept his ERA under 4. I don't remember what he started the season at either. Doesn't look like he got a ton of upgrades, so maybe he started at a 70, went up 2. But only 19 walks also, so he had a lot of control. And like I said, he was one of my favorite guys to use, especially early on when our bullpen wasn't too strong. He seemed to play above his ratings, .4 WAR. Then we got Jesse Chavez. He was weirdly good too. I didn't really use him that much because I felt like Hernandez was better, so if I was ever in the situation to choose between the two, I was always choosing Hernandez. But Jesse Chavez, 36 years old, he really didn't decline at all. Maybe went down a couple. I mean, he's only a 67 overall to begin with, so for him to do this good in a season, kind of unexpected. I feel like he flew under the radar too. Throughout the year, it wasn't like I kept looking at him oh, he's one of the better pieces of our bullpen. But I mean, he kind of was. Not a crazy strikeout total, but an ERA under 3. Got 60 innings of work in, 3 holds, and a .4 WAR again. Then we had Jordan Lyles. He could have been better. But honestly, even though he has a 6.14 ERA, even though he gave up 50 runs, even though he has a 1.62 whip, I don't think he did as bad as the numbers say. Now, I didn't use him a whole lot, but he was in the long relief role the whole season. So when you're a long reliever, you're really only coming into the game if your team is ahead by a bunch, which that's not usually the case, because usually if your team's ahead by a bunch, your starter isn't taken out early, so you don't need to have a long reliever. but sometimes that's the case. Most of the time, if you're a long relief pitcher and you come into the game, it's because your team is getting absolutely plastered. Is plastered the right word? I think that means drunk. Let's just say if your team's getting destroyed, that's when you come in as a long reliever. So like, for me, when you're coming in only situations like that, if you're allowing a 6.14 ERA, that's really not that bad for me. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but he actually had a -8 WAR, so I guess the game disagrees with me. The game says he had a pretty bad season. I mean, I'm not saying he did good by any stretch of the mean of any. What's the phrase? I don't even know. But I don't know. Better than Rafael Montero or whatever his name was that got sent down. And then our only guy listed as a closer, Josh Hader. We got him. I don't remember how late into the year, but it was pretty late. He was one of our later trades. But he improved a little bit throughout the year. I don't know what he would have started at. I don't know how he's that low of an overall to begin with, honestly. But you know what you're going to get out of Hader? A lot of strikeouts. He actually didn't allow a home run this year, which is actually big. Because in real life, that's kind of like his one problem. I mean, look at 2019. Only allowed 22 runs, but 15 home runs. So yeah, he got 14 holds before I put him in the closer role. And then when I did, he had 8 saves, and obviously he had those 4 straight 1-run lead saves that he got to end the season. All of those were huge. And any of his bad stats, like the 4 blown saves, I don't even know if that came from me, because he was on the Brewers at the beginning of the year. His ERA was up in like the 4s, which is probably why they were fine with trading him away. But once Hader came to us, he was pretty much the Hader we all know. He was pretty locked down. So yeah, he had a 2.84 ERA. He ended up with a 1.2 WAR. I'd like to know what the splits were between him being on the Brewers and then us getting him, because for all I know, he could have an ERA under 1 since we got him. Alright, on to some position players now. Let's start with Trevino. I'll go back to Perez afterward, but Jose Trevino, this is not a guy that I thought I was going to like using. This guy, when I first started the game, was like almost the epitome of how I saw the Rangers. Like, just somebody who's already in their mid to late 20s. They're not really going to turn into anything. They're not already anything. Like, you look at his attributes, he's nothing special. But he put together a good season. Couldn't quite get that 10th home run. I was hoping he would. But I'm pretty sure earlier on in the season, before we got Perez, I was splitting time at catcher between Trevino against the lefty, and then I think when a righty was pitching, I had Kiner Falefa playing catcher because he has a secondary. But when Trevino was playing, he was really good. He kept that average pretty high up there all year. He was hitting for a decent amount of power early on. I mean, obviously his playing time decreased a lot once we got Perez, but up until that point, he was actually a really good piece on this team. And he finished with a 1.3 WAR, so like that's pretty good. But then on to Salvador Perez, potentially our team MVP. There could be a couple of guys that goes to. But he was definitely, well, I actually don't know. I was going to say he was the biggest trade we made, but there was also Hader and Margot. But Perez was still insane. Yeah, I mean, he went up. He went up a lot, actually. +4 to each power, +8 to his vision. But then, yeah, looking at his numbers here, really good at the plate. Really good at the plate. The most home runs he's ever hit in a season by far. He hit 39, 26 doubles, drove in over 100 runs. At the plate, this was the best season of his entire career. He even stole 5 bases somehow. But yeah, he was a huge trade for us. Came through in a lot of key situations. Ended up with a 5.8 WAR, so that blows any other season out of the water. So easily his best season of his entire career. And then moving on to first base, and like honestly from this point on, the positions almost don't matter, because there were points where like anyone could play anywhere. We had a lot of guys with secondary positions, playing in their secondary positions, playing DH all over the place. So Dietrich was listed as a first baseman, but who knows? He might have not even played any first base this year. But even he ended up improving a decent amount across the board. I don't know what he started at, but he ended at a 70. And I mean, he kind of just had a pretty standard Dietrich season. He was really slow out of the gates, but then kind of near the end, he really heated up. Got his home run total up to 17, batting .264. He had that down year last year with Cincinnati, or I guess 2 years ago now at this point, but in this game last year, which actually now that I think about it, do people even think of that as a down year? I mean, yeah, his average is only 187, but I feel like when I think of Dietrich, I always think of him as a Red. But yeah, he was a pretty solid piece. I mean, 352 at-bats, that's another thing you're going to see, is the at-bats were really spread out amongst everybody. Like, even Jose Trevino had like 250. So a lot of people got a lot of chances to hit. We didn't really have dedicated bench guys throughout the entire season. And then we scroll over. Dietrich ended up with... He had a negative WAR. See, I like the stat of WAR. I like the concept that it measures somebody's like overall production, but I have no clue what goes into it. If I was just looking at Dietrich's stat line here, there is no chance that I would look at this and say, oh yeah, he's not even below league average, but below replacement level. There'd be no indication of that. But apparently he was a negative .1 win player. I don't see it, but I guess that's what it is. And then our other listed first baseman was Ronald Guzman. I didn't start using him all that much until a little bit later in the season, but he got some playing time from about the midway point till the end. He was the starting first baseman against righties. He went up a pretty decent amount throughout the season. I don't know what he started at. I probably should have kept track of what these people started at, because there was a lot of guys we're gonna progress because there's a lot of younger dudes. But yeah, he went up a little bit, pretty much across the board. He was an average player also, nothing special, but obviously he had that huge home run against the Twins to kick off that last episode and pretty much led to us clinching. So 14 homers on the season, batted .248. I mean, actually, if you look at his other 2 seasons he has here, it's almost identical, especially the OPS. I mean, he had 722 the year before, 723, and then 722. So I guess he was exactly what he always is. But he had a .8 WAR. Over to second base, let's start with Solak. He was a guy that I did not like at the beginning part of the season. Actually, probably like the first 3/4 of the season I wasn't a fan of. But being an A potential, he went up a pretty decent amount. By looking at this, you actually wouldn't think he went up by as much as he did, but I think he started at a 75, but it might have been a 77. But still, going up either 3 or 5 overall is not bad. He finished out almost batting .300. For the first like month or 2 of the season, he was down around .200, so he turned it around a lot. Decent power numbers. 16 home runs is definitely something. Wish he'd try to steal a little bit less. I mean, there's a reason he has a stealing attribute of only 2. That's one thing I don't get about the CPU, is they just steal with anybody. But yeah, Nick Solak then finishing out the season with a 3.2 WAR, so he ended up being one of the better players on the team actually. And then our other second baseman, in real life, he's I guess at the point of being so bad that teams are getting rid of him for, what is it, luxury tax room or something like that. I don't know. All I know is the Rangers like traded him to the Yankees for pretty much nothing. But in this, he was pretty good. He put up one of his better seasons, 28 home runs, so the power was still there. But if you look back, whenever he had higher power seasons besides 2016, his average suffered a lot. But in this season, it really didn't. He stuck around with a 260 average. He had that 8.11 OPS, 13 steals. Got a lot of playing time for most of the season. He was starting second baseman. He's like the only guy besides Perez who was like a one-position dude, I guess, and Andrews. But I liked using Odor. He had a 3.6 WAR. I always felt like he was a threat to go deep, especially when there was a righty on the mound. But yeah, he even with his B potential, he went up a little bit over the course of the year too. And he's actually unhappy right now. Why? Cheer up, we're in the playoffs. Third base now, and we got Kiner Falefa. He was a catcher for a lot of the beginning of the season because against righties, he caught. But then once we got Perez, he played more third. And I mean, if you look at him, He went up a lot throughout the year. He struggled in the last like third of the season, but at the beginning he was one of our better players. But look at how much his power went up. He started the year with power like, well, what would that be? If it was +7 and +13, it'd be 34 and 40 power. Finished with 41 and 53 power. So the power went up a lot, and that's the reason he hit 17 home runs. The average I thought should have been a lot higher. I mean, for so much of the season, he was like between 280 and 300. And then something happened near the end, and he fell off hard. But he also stole 23 bases with only 63 speed, so the CPU was just steal happy. But I liked him. I liked using him too. 4.1 win player. He felt like it. He was good. Over to shortstop, the veteran, Elvis Andrus. He played almost every game, all but 5 games this season, and he was solid. He was really good. It was like the Elvis Andrus from a couple of years ago when he was one of the better shortstops in the league. But he had 170 hits, just over 600 at bats. He was pretty much always batting near the bottom of the order too, except for maybe the beginning of the season. I might have had him in the 2-hole against lefties. I don't remember. But he put up 16 home runs, so the power came back a little bit. Drove in a lot of runs, drew a lot of walks. And then he had 23 steals on only 43 speed. So again, the CPU, I mean, at least this time it's more in line with how many steals he has in real life. So I guess that makes sense. But yeah, definitely a bounce back season for him. I liked using him too. He was fun to hit with. And I felt like I put a lot of good swings on the ball with him. And he was a 4.1 win player also. Out to left field, we'll start with Shin-Soo Choo, sure. He was our veteran at the beginning of the year. I thought he was going to be the Ryan Braun from the 2019 Brewers March to October, or the Edwin from the White Sox March to October, but he fell off a little bit too much to stay in that role. Did not get a lot of playing time after like a third of the season, but he made the most of it when he did. At the start of the season, he was really good. He hit 13 bombs, drove in 38. I remember that huge home run against the Angels he hit in extra innings. And still by the end of it, he kept that on base above a 400. So who knows, maybe if I would have kept using him, maybe if I would have kept him in the DH spot for the whole year, maybe he wouldn't have regressed quite as much. And he would have ended up putting up pretty good numbers, but I couldn't justify having a 57 overall in over somebody else. And also he finished with a 1.8 wins above replacement. Next left fielder here is Joey Gallo. And I'll be honest, I was a little disappointed with his season. I was expecting him to be like our star player. Weirdly enough, I didn't hit with him all that well. I can only remember hitting the 1 home run with him. But I mean, his contact went up. It's bound to go up when it was that low to start. But yeah, I mean, it was a Joey Gallo season. In real life, it'd be an improvement. But I wanted to see him go off. He still hit 35 homers, but the average down in the 230s. The most strikeouts he's ever had. It's Joey Gallo. And then he finished with a 2.8 WAR. Then we move over to Willie Calhoun, and he was pretty solid. You can see, being 25, B potential, he improved quite a bit. He was really good against lefties. 70 overall to end the season. I think he started at like a 67. But he got a lot of hits, 127 hits, 27 bombs, so the power was there. I think that a lot of that came late in the year. Because I want to say when we made our last trade for David Phelps on the deadline, we could have traded away Willie Calhoun for somebody else. And I think at that time he might have only had like 15 home runs. So most of his, well, not most, but a lot of his home runs came in the last 2 months of the season. And he was really good. I liked him. I liked hitting with him. And I liked what he ended up doing, batting .288. He's definitely not a good fielder though. Made 5 errors. Fielding percentage at .918. I know fielding percentage isn't a stat that a lot of people like, but when it's low, I feel like it does carry some weight when the fielding percentage is like down there. But Willie finishes with a 2.1 wins above replacement. And the last 2 players here, only a couple more to get through. I did not hold myself back at all. But we got Danny Santana. And this guy, he was a surprise to me. I mean, I knew he was solid, being a switch hitter and all, solid player, but like, 29 home runs is not what I expected. I know it's pretty much in line with what he did the year before, but I don't know, to me it was kind of unexpected. I guess the more I look at it, he had a really similar season to 2019, like a similar amount of home runs, similar number of strikeouts, batting average. So I guess now the more I look at it, the less of a surprise it should have been, but he was still pretty good. I liked hitting with him. He was one of the more satisfying perfects, if that makes any sense. And he finished with a 4.5 WAR. And actually, he did not have as many errors as I would have thought. I don't remember where all he played, but there were times where he'd play first, sometimes played the outfield, sometimes DH'd. But I guess based on the put out amount, he played a lot of first base. And then our last guy here, another big trade we made. I think it was the first trade we made too, but it was Manuel Margot. And I remember when we traded for him, that was like the biggest need that we had on our team. Because if you remember back, we had Leody Taveras, who was like a 50-something overall, starting in center field. And getting Margot was just a huge upgrade. And then to have Margot improve as much as he did, even better. I mean, he got plus 10 to his power against lefties. And yeah, he put up numbers. Couldn't quite get over the 300 average mark. So actually, did we have anybody hit over 300? But he had just about 600 at bats, 177 hits, 45 doubles, and 26 homers. So the power really showed up for him. Drove in a lot of runs, even though for the most part he was either leading off or batting 2. 18 steals, only 2 caught stealing, finished with a 900 OPS. This was Manuel Margot's breakout season. I mean, he was an all-star, so makes sense. Only 1 error, 8.2 wins above replacement. Man, I did not know it was that high. So overall, this Rangers team for the regular season was so much fun. I had such low expectations coming in, especially those first couple of games. I remember I couldn't get anybody to hit the ball hard at all. But things really turned around, and a lot of these guys, not even the guys we traded for. Obviously, the guys we traded for were good, but a lot of the guys we already had were some of the guys who are the most fun to use. I mean, Andrews, I loved hitting with him. Odor was so fun to hit with. Kiner Falefa was good. But yeah, this video has already gone on long enough. I did not hold myself back at all, like I said I would. So if you're still even watching at this point, you're a real one, because even I wouldn't be watching at this point. But if you are, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to see the rest of the Rangers. March to October, we are in the playoffs, hurtling towards the end. And we're also hurtling towards MLB 21, which I've got a lot in store for. But until then, that's all I've got. I hope you all enjoyed somehow. But I'll see you in the next one.